I was holding the gift wrapped in blue paper when my daughter-in-law Sophia approached me with that smile I already knew, the smile that didn't reach her eyes, and whispered right in my ear while pretending to hug me in front of all the guests at my grandson Lucas's 5th birthday party. She whispered in a low, venomous voice that only I could hear, "You ruin everything, Grandma Clara. Every party gets heavy when you arrive." And I felt my entire body freeze right there in the middle of the room, decorated with balloons from Spider-Man. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a sunny Saturday in November. The temperature was 28 degrees, and there were 23 people in that house in the Jardim das Acacias neighborhood, family and friends of my son Roberto and Sophia, and everyone without exception pretended not to hear that. They continued talking and laughing as if nothing had happened. My son was less than 2 meters away cutting the cake and didn't turn his face. My daughter Beatrice, who was sitting on the sofa next to her, looked away at her cell phone. Sophia's father-in-law, who was always polite with me, suddenly found it urgent to go to the kitchen, and I stood there in my flowery dress that I had ironed for 40 minutes that morning, because I wanted to look presentable for my grandson's party. I stood there at 67 years of age, feeling like the ground was going to swallow me, feeling my heart beating so hard that I thought everyone would hear it, feeling my hands start to sweat cold while I was still holding that gift that I had chosen with so much care 3 days before. A fire truck that cost 89 reais, almost a third of my pension of 2,400 reais. And Sophia moved away from that fake hug and went to Lucas as if nothing had happened. She took my grandson by the hand and said out loud for everyone to hear, "Come, Lucas, and thank Grandma Clara for the gift before she needs to leave." And the way she said it, the tone, the emphasis on "before she needs to leave," it was a clear message. It was a disguised order. It was her telling me to get out of there as soon as possible. I tried to smile at Lucas when he came up to me, my beautiful little grandson with light brown hair and eyes like my late husband Henrique. I hugged him too tight, perhaps. I smelled the baby shampoo in his hair, and when I asked to take a photo with the whole family, just a photo for me to remember, Sophia made that face, that expression that I had seen so many times in the last 3 years, that mix of impatience and barely concealed disgust. But she agreed, because there were other people watching and everyone smiled. They gathered around the cake, my son Roberto on my right side but with his body slightly tilted to the opposite side, Beatrice on the other side looking at the camera with a mechanical smile, Sophia hugging Lucas and her husband as if she was protecting them from me, and Sophia's sister-in-law was the one who took the photo with her cell phone. She said they were smiling, and I tried to smile, but my mouth was trembling. And when the photo was taken, everyone immediately dispersed, as if I had some contagious disease. I spent another 20 minutes at that party, 20 endless minutes where I tried to talk to people, but the conversations died down quickly, where I took a piece of cake but couldn't swallow it because I had a lump in my throat, where I went to the bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror and saw an old, tired woman with red eyes holding back tears with all the strength she still had. And when I finally decided to leave, it was already 4:15 in the afternoon. I picked up my brown bag, with a strap that I had had for 12 years, that bag that Henrique had given me on my birthday. 55 years old, a few months before he died, I went to politely say goodbye to everyone. Lucas gave me a quick hug and ran off to play with his friends. Sophia waved from afar without getting up from the sofa. My son Roberto accompanied me to the gate and just said, "See you later, Mother," with that monotone voice, without warmth, without affection, and I said, "See you later, son," wanting to say so many other things but not being able to, and I walked the 2 blocks to the bus stop because I didn't have a car. Henrique had died 7 years ago in a massive stroke at 6 in the morning on a Tuesday, and since then I lived alone in my 42 square meter apartment in the Centro neighborhood. And while waiting for the bus under the hot sun that afternoon, I opened my bag to get the tissue because the tears were finally falling, and that was when I saw the note. It was a white paper folded into 4 parts, placed inside my bag at some point that afternoon without me noticing, and I immediately recognized Sophia's neat handwriting, that round, slanted handwriting she had, and my hands shook when I opened that paper right there at the bus stop, us with 2 other people waiting beside me. And I read the sentence that was written in blue pen in large, clear letters. "Don't you realize that no one here wants you around? You are a dead weight that we carry out of obligation. Do everyone a favor and get out of our lives before we have to put you in an asylum and forget you there." I read it once, Then I read it again. Then a third time, because my brain refused to process that those words were actually written there, that someone had actually put it in my bag, that my grandson's mother, the woman my son had chosen to marry, had given me that message with such cruelty, and my vision went blurry. I felt my legs wobble. The woman next to me asked if I was okay, and I lied that I was. I put the paper back in my bag. I wiped my face with my hands, back of my hand. And when the bus arrived 5 minutes later, I got on and went to the back and cried the entire 28-minute ride to my neighborhood. I cried in silence as the bus rocked and other people talked on their cell phones, and I held that bag to my chest as if it was the only thing keeping me grounded in reality. I got off the bus at 5:10 in the afternoon, walked the 200 meters to my building, went up the stairs to the second floor because the elevator had been broken for 3 weeks. I entered the empty and silent apartment. I left my bag on the sofa, took off my shoes, and went straight to the bedroom without even turning on the lights. I lay down on the bed still wearing the flowery dress, and I stared at the ceiling as the afternoon got dark. I lay there without the strength to move, without the strength to cry anymore, just feeling empty. Huge pain in my chest, a pain that wasn't physical, but that hurt more than any physical pain I had ever felt in my life. Before continuing this story that still has many twists and turns, I need you to understand one thing. If you have already experienced humiliation from someone who should love you, leave your like now. Subscribe to the channel because this story is going to be long and the revenge will be proportional to the pain. And comment from which city you are watching because I need to know that I'm not alone in this. I need to know that other people understand what it's like to be treated like disposable trash by your own family. So comment on your city. And let's continue because what you just read was just at first, it was just the tip of the iceberg of a humiliation that had been building for years and that I had refused to see until that brutal moment on Lucas's birthday. I lay in that bed until it got completely dark, until I heard the neighbors coming home from work, until I heard the noise of the television from the apartment next door, and finally, at 7:30 in the evening, I got up and went to the living room, took my bag, took that note out of it, and read it again, under the dim light of the lamp. I read each word more carefully. Don't you realize that no one here wants you around? You are a dead weight that we carry out of obligation. Do everyone a favor and get out of our lives before we need you. Admitting you to an asylum and forgetting you there. And this time reading it didn't make me cry. This time I felt something different. I felt anger starting to rise. Anger at having accepted being treated like that. Anger at having remained silent so many times before. Because that note hadn't been the first humiliation. It had just been the most explicit, the cruelest, but the signs had been there for years, and I had pretended not to see. I had justified each one of them. I had convinced myself that I was being too sensitive, too dramatic, too needy. I picked up my cell phone, which was almost running out of battery, 10% charged, and opened the messaging app. I saw that I had 0 unread messages, 0 missed calls. No one had bothered to know if I had gotten home safely after the party. No one had even sent me the photo we had taken together. And I went to the chat history and started scrolling back. I started seeing the messages from the last few months and noticing patterns that I had ignored. 3 weeks before I had sent a message to Roberto, asking if they wanted to come to my house for lunch on Sunday. I was going to make the pasta with sauce that he loved when he was a child. His response had come 6 hours later, just an "Oh, Mom. We already have a commitment." No elaborate excuse, no offer of another day, just a dry refusal. 5 weeks before I had sent a message asking if I could take Lucas for ice cream in the square, Sophia had replied after a whole day, "Today it's not possible, Clara. He has a lot of schoolwork, and he had never offered me another day as an option." 2 months earlier, it was Roberto's birthday, and I had sent a message at 6 in the morning wishing him a happy birthday with 3 red hearts. He had responded at 10 at night, just, "But thank you." A dry, cold word, without a heart, without a "thank you, Mother." 3 months earlier, I had sent a photo of a cake recipe and asked if Lucas liked that type because I wanted to make it to take to him. No one had responded. The message had remained there in a vacuum with 2 blue ticks showing that they had read it, but no one had bothered to respond, even if it was with an okay. I went back even further in the history, 6 months earlier, 8 months, a year, and I saw the gradual deterioration. I saw how the responses had become shorter, longer, colder. I saw how I was always the one who started the conversation. the one who asked how they were, the one who offered to help, the one who sent messages on important dates, and the responses when they came were monosyllabic, obligations fulfilled without love. And I had normalized all that. I had convinced myself that they were just busy with their lives, that it was normal from a distance, but it wasn't normal. It wasn't acceptable. It was veiled cruelty that had culminated in that note. I got up from the sofa and went to the bedroom closet, opened the bottom drawer where I kept old documents and photographs, and started taking everything out, spreading it on the floor, looking for evidence of what I already knew but needed to confirm, looking for evidence that I wasn't crazy, that I had been a good mother, a good person, that I didn't deserve that treatment. I found photos of Roberto as a child, Roberto at the age of 4, wearing the superhero costume that I had sewn by hand for 3 nights in a row because we didn't have money to buy a ready-made costume. Roberto at the age of 7, on the day of his graduation from 2nd grade at the private school where I had gotten him a scholarship to study after begging the principal and offering to clean the school in exchange. Roberto, at the age of 12, holding the school's football championship trophy, wearing the football boots that I had bought in 8 installments on my credit card, which was already at its limit. I found his report cards, all with good grades, because I sat with him every night to do homework, even after working 12 hours as a cleaning assistant in a hospital. I got home at 7 at night with my back hurting and my feet swollen, and I still sat with him until 10 at night, reviewing mathematics, Portuguese, science. I found payment receipts for an English course that I paid for him to take for 3 years when he was 15, 16, 17 years old, a course that cost 350 reais a month at the time, and that took up almost half of my income, but I paid because he said he needed English to have a better future, and I managed the rest, ate less, didn't buy clothes, didn't go to the doctor when I was sick. I also found Henrique's documents, death certificate dated 7 years ago. Death certificate indicating ischemic stroke as the cause of death. He was only 61 years old when he died. We had been married for 38 years, since I was 21 and he was 23. He was a truck driver, and I was a cleaning assistant, and together we raised Roberto in a 2-room shack for the first 10 years of the boy's life until we were able to buy, with great sacrifice, that small apartment, where I live today alone, an apartment that took us 15 years to pay for, paying 500 reais a month religiously. And when we finally paid off, Henrique said that now we could breathe a sigh of relief. But 3 years later, he was dead on the kitchen floor, with breakfast half eaten. I had left for work at 5:45 in the morning, and when I came back at noon to make lunch, I found him lying there, cold, his eyes open, looking at nothing. And I screamed so much that the neighbors called the ambulance, but it was too late. He had died probably at 6 in the morning and sat there alone for 6 hours until I arrived. Roberto had come to the wake, but only stayed for 2 hours. He had left, saying he needed to work the next day and couldn't miss the day. He didn't even stay with me that first terrible night, where I came home and everything smelled like Henrique, but he wasn't there anymore. I was alone that night and the other 1,000 nights that came after. I gathered all those photos and documents, put them back in the drawer carefully, and finally I was able to cry again. But it was a different cry. It was crying of anger mixed with mourning. Mourning for the son I had raised and who no longer existed, for the man he had become, for the relationship that slowly died without me having the courage to admit it. I looked at the wall clock in the living room. It was 9:40 on Saturday night. It had been 6 hours and 25 minutes since I had left that party, and my cell phone hadn't received any messages. No connection, nothing. It was as if I didn't exist, as if I were already dead, and maybe that was what they wanted, for me to die soon so that I would no longer be a burden, no longer an obligation, to free them from the guilt of abandoning me in life, because once I was dead they could pretend that they were good sons, good daughters-in-law. They could cry at my funeral, and everyone would believe that they loved me. I felt a wave of nausea rising. I ran to the bathroom and vomited the bitter bile because I hadn't eaten anything since breakfast. Those 3 pieces of toast with margarine that I had eaten at 7 in the morning before I started to get ready for the party. I vomited and remained there kneeling on the cold bathroom floor, hugging the toilet, feeling that my life was over, that at 67 years old I had nothing left. I had no husband, I had no real son, I had no grandson that I could see whenever I wanted. No, I had close friends, because I had spent my entire life working and taking care of my family and never had time left to cultivate friendships. I only had that small apartment, and my pension of 2,400 Rs, and a lot of memories that now hurt more than they warmed. I got up from the bathroom floor after about 15 minutes, washed my face with cold water, looked at myself in the mirror, and saw a destroyed woman, disheveled gray hair, swollen eyes, pale skin, wrinkles that seemed to have deepened in the last few hours, and I thought clearly for the first time that night. I thought I had two options. The first option was to do what the note suggested, disappear, maybe even die, because it would be easier for everyone and they wouldn't even miss me. Second, the option was something that I didn't even know exactly what it was yet, but it involved not accepting it silently. It involved doing something, anything, to not die in that miserable and humiliated way. I didn't make a decision that night. I was too exhausted. I just went back to bed, laid down with my clothes on, and slept soundly and dreamlessly until Sunday morning when I woke up at 10 o'clock. A very rare thing, because I always woke up early even on weekends, but I was so tired emotionally and physically that my body simply shut down. I woke up with a terrible thirst, dry mouth, throbbing head. I went to the kitchen and drank 2 large glasses of water. I looked at my cell phone and there was a message. My heart skipped a beat for a second, thinking it was from Roberto or Beatriz, but it was just market advertising. Nothing real, nothing that mattered. I spent that entire Sunday in a kind of trance. I made coffee and drank it without feeling any taste. I turned on the television, but didn't pay attention to anything that was going on. I picked up a book of chronicles that was on the coffee table, but I read the same page 4 times without absorbing anything. I took a long shower, letting the hot water fall on my back until the water started to get cold. I dressed in comfortable old house clothes, and I sat there on the couch, not knowing what to do with myself, not knowing how to fill that empty day. And that was when I realized that all my Sundays had been like this for years, empty, lonely, endless, and I had learned to accept that loneliness as normal. I had learned to find small pleasures in reading crosswords from the magazine I bought at the newsstand, in watching old soap operas that were shown on the open channel, in watering the 5 little plants I had on the balcony. But now even these small pleasures seemed empty, because I had been forced to see reality. I was not alone by choice or natural circumstance. I was alone because my family had discarded me. I had decided that I was no longer worth the minimal effort of a visit, a 5-minute phone call, an invitation to have lunch together. And then, in the middle of that Sunday afternoon at 3:30, when the sun came through the living room window, illuminating the old furniture and the walls that needed painting, my cell phone rang. And for the first time in 24 hours, I felt something similar to hope. I quickly picked up the cell phone. It was an unknown number. I answered, "Hello." And on the other side, a young female voice asked if it was Clara Mendez. I confirmed that it was, and the voice said that I was calling from San Lucas Hospital, informing that my daughter Beatriz had been admitted to the emergency room 2 hours ago with suspicion of appendicitis and had put my name as an emergency contact. And my first thought after the scare was, so she still remembers that I exist at least for emergencies, so I'm still good for something. I quickly grabbed my things, bag, documents, cell phone, key. I locked the apartment and went down the stairs, almost falling in a hurry. I went to the street and stopped the first taxi that passed by. I asked to go urgently to the San Lucas Hospital, which was 6 kilometers away. The ride cost 23 Rs, which I paid, without even asking for change because I was so nervous. I arrived at the hospital at 5:04 on Sunday afternoon. I went straight to the reception desk and asked for Beatriz Mendez Santos. The attendant checked the system and told me that she was in the emergency room observation room. I walked through those cold, white corridors of the hospital that reminded me of the years I worked cleaning the hospital. I arrived at the observation room and saw Beatriz lying on a stretcher with an IV in her arm. She was 32 years old. She had been married for 6 years to a man called Fernando, who worked in a bank. They had no children yet. They lived in a rented 3-bedroom apartment in the upscale neighborhood of the city. And when Beatriz saw me enter the room, she made a face of surprise that quickly turned into something akin to embarrassment, and I approached the stretcher and asked what had happened. She explained to me in a weak voice that she had started to feel severe pain on the right side of her stomach since the early hours of Sunday and had lasted it until noon when the pain became unbearable and Fernando had brought her to the Hospital, the doctors suspected appendicitis and were doing tests to confirm if I would need surgery, and I asked where Fernando was. She said he had gone home to get some of her things and would be back soon. I stood there on the side of the gurney holding her hand, and for a few minutes it was like the old days when she was a child and was sick, and I took care of her all night, and I felt that mother's love coming back strongly, that love that hurts so intensely. But then she gently let go of my hand and said, "Mom, you didn't need to come. I'll be fine. It must have been a mistake for the hospital to call you." And those words were like a slap in the face. You didn't need to come. She was dismissing me there in the hospital's observation room, dismissing my concern, my care, my presence, and I was going to say something. But at that moment, Fernando arrived carrying a backpack with her clothes. He greeted me with a dry "Hello, Clara," and positioned himself on the other side of the stretcher as if he was marking his territory. And Beatrice looked at him and then at me and said, "Mom, now that Fernando has arrived, you can go. I'll let you know if you need surgery." And Fernando added, "Clara, we can manage here. You must be tired. You can go home and rest." And the way he said, that tone of false kindness that was actually a disguised order for me to get out of there, made me realize that it wasn't just Roberto and Sofia. It was the whole family. It was my 2 children who had discarded me. It was all of them who had silently agreed that I was disposable. I left that hospital at 4:45 on Sunday afternoon, without saying goodbye properly. I just waved at the door, and they barely looked. I walked to the bus stop in front of the hospital and waited 28 minutes for the bus to arrive. Because on Sundays the frequency was lower, I went home, and it was 6:15 in the afternoon when I entered the empty apartment again. And this time, I didn't cry. This time, I sat on the sofa and stared at the wall for hours. I stayed there until it got completely dark and the lights in the street lamps light up. I kept thinking about my entire life, about the 50 years I spent working from the age of 17 when I started as a maid in a family home. I worked in 8 different houses over 15 years before getting the job as a cleaning assistant at the hospital where I stayed for 26 years until I retired at 63. I worked 6 days a week for decades. Holidays, Christmas, New Year, birthdays, always working, always. Saving every penny, always prioritizing the children's needs over my own. And throughout all this, over time I accumulated some savings. Not much because my salary was always low, but I managed to save over 30 years around 123,000 reais that were invested in a savings account at Caixa Econômica. Money that I had never touched because it was my reserve for emergencies or to leave an inheritance to my children when I died. If you've been following this story so far, I need you to leave a like because now you'll see the turnaround. Comment from which country you're watching, and if you've ever felt invisible to those who should love you, know that this turnaround is for all of us who were underestimated. So comment on your city, and let's continue, because it's now that I stop being a victim and start defending myself. It's now that the woman they trampled on will stand up and show that she still has strength. She still has dignity. She still has the right to exist and be respected. I spent that Sunday night awake. I couldn't sleep for a minute. I sat at the kitchen table with a pen and an old notebook writing everything down, making a list of everything I had done for them over the years and everything they owed me, not in emotional terms, but in practical terms. And documented. Because I needed to take the emotion out of the game and see the cold facts. And the facts were devastating. I started adding up values. When Roberto studied business at a private university for 4 years, I paid a monthly fee of 800 reais per month because he hadn't managed to pass the federal exam and said he needed that degree to have a future. 800 reais times 48 months was 38,400 reais that came out of my account. Over those 4 years, and how was I able to pay that with a salary of cleaning assistant? I worked overtime whenever I could. I worked weekends at a family home doing private cleaning. I sold brigadeiros and cakes to neighbors and co-workers. I lived with the absolute minimum so that he could have that training, and when he graduated, he barely thanked me. He took a photo with the diploma and posted it on social media, thanking Sofia, who at the time was just his girlfriend, but didn't mention me, even once. I continued adding up. When Beatrice took a technical nursing course that lasted 2 years, I paid a monthly fee of 550 reais per month, plus teaching materials that totaled around 200 reais per semester. In total, I spent approximately 14,000 reais on her training. And in addition, when she started working at the private hospital and needed to buy specific uniforms and hospital shoes, I gave her 1,200 reais for these purchases. And when she married Fernando 6 years ago, I gave her 10,000 reais as a wedding gift. Reais to help them furnish the apartment they had rented? 10,000 reais that compromised almost all of my savings at that time. And I remember that Fernando's mother, who was a woman of means, gave them the value of 25,000 reais and kept throwing it in their faces at every family lunch that she had helped much more, and Beatriz never defended me, never said that my 10,000 reais represented much more sacrifice than the rich mother-in-law's 25,000. I also wrote down loans that I took out, and they were never returned. 4 years ago, Roberto asked me to borrow 15,000 reais, saying that he had credit card debt and needed to pay it off urgently, otherwise the interest would consume him. I took that money from my savings and gave it to him. He promised to pay it back in installments of 500 reais per month, but he only paid 3 installments of 1,500 reais in total. And then he stopped paying, and when I collected it, he said that he was financially tight and that I didn't need that money urgently, so I could wait. I waited 4 years and he never paid again. He still owes me 13,500 reais. 2 years ago, Sophia asked me to borrow money to take a specialization course in business management. She said that she would get a job promotion if she took the course. She asked for 8,000 reais. I hesitated because I had already lost money with Roberto, but she assured me that she would pay everything back in 10 months because the promotion would come soon. I ended up giving the money, and she only paid 2 installments of 800 reais each and disappeared when I charged her. She said that the course had not resulted in a promotion, so it wasn't fair for me to charge, as if it was my fault for not having had a promotion. Dude, she still owes me 6,400 reais. Adding up everything they owed me in money was a total of 19,900 reais, without counting interest or monetary correction. And adding up everything I invested in their education and life over the years was 63,600 reais, without counting birthday and Christmas gifts, not counting clothes and shoes I bought when they were children and teenagers, not counting food and housing for 20-odd years, not counting medicine when they were sick, not counting all the times I went without buying something for myself so I could give them something for them. And in addition to the money, I had the house, the apartment where I lived, which was valued at approximately 250,000 reais, according to research I did on real estate websites that morning. An apartment that Henrique and I paid for alone for 15 years with our sweat, and which would naturally be divided between Roberto and Beatriz when I died, since it was my only valuable asset. But did they deserve to inherit that? Did people who treated me like dead weight deserve to benefit from my death? And it was with this in mind that at 5:40 in the morning, on Monday, I made the first concrete decision. I was going to look for a lawyer. I still didn't know exactly what to do, but I knew I needed legal guidance. I needed to know my rights. I needed to transform that pain and humiliation into practical action. I took a shower at 6:20 in the morning, dressed in the most formal clothes I had, which was black pants and a gray formal blouse. I tied my hair in a bun, put on light makeup, looked in the mirror, and saw a woman. Unlike the one on Saturday afternoon, I still wasn't the strong woman I wanted to be, but I was a woman who had decided to stop passively accepting cruelty. At 8 in the morning on Monday, I was at the door of the office of lawyer Rodrigo Mendes, which was located at Rua Central number 523 in the city center, a small 2-room office on the second floor of an old commercial building. I had found his contact with the neighbor in the next apartment, Ms. Conceição, aged 74, who was a widow and who sometimes I would talk to in the hallway. She had recommended this lawyer to me, saying that he was serious and did not charge too much for the first consultation. I called his number on Sunday night and scheduled an appointment for Monday at 8:30. I arrived 10 minutes early and was greeted by a young secretary who offered me coffee and asked me to wait. At 8:35, I was called to enter the office where Dr. Rodrigo Mendes was sitting behind a table full of papers. He was 52 years old, according to the information the secretary had given. Gray hair, prescription glasses, gray jacket, serious but not cold expression. He greeted me and asked me to sit down and tell him what I needed, and I started talking and didn't stop. I told him everything from the note on Lucas's birthday to the hospital and Beatrice dismissing me. I showed the note that I had brought with me, kept inside a plastic envelope. He read, It carefully and made some notes, then asked me several specific questions. How long ago the treatment had changed, what were the signs that I had ignored, if I had witnesses of any humiliation, if I had proof of money borrowed, and I answered everything and showed the documents I had brought, proof of transfer loan accounts, college payment receipts that I still kept, old notes from the notebook where I tracked expenses. Dr. Rodrigo listened to me for almost 2 hours without interrupting me much. He made notes on a yellow pad, and when I finished, he spent a few minutes in silence organizing his thoughts. Then he said, "Look, Clara, in all sincerity, what you went through is psychological family abuse. It is domestic violence that leaves no physical mark, but leaves a deep mark on the soul. And unfortunately, these situations are more common than people imagine. Adult children who mistreat elderly parents, hoping that they will die soon to inherit. Family members who see the elderly as a burden and not as person. And in most cases, the elderly accept it silently because they are afraid of loneliness or because they believe they deserve that treatment. But you taking this step of coming here already shows that you will not accept it, and I can help you. Yes, I can help you take legal measures to protect your assets and your dignity. I will explain the options to you. First option, you can file a collection action to recover the money from unpaid loans. With proof of transfer, we have a solid basis. We will probably be able to recover at least 80% of the updated value with interest through an agreement or sentence. We are talking about approximately 25,000 Rs. Second option, you can make a new will completely excluding Roberto and Beatrice from the inheritance and leaving your assets to whoever you want, charity, friend, neighbor, anyone. You are within your full right to do this. The law guarantees that 50% of the assets is a mandatory reserve for direct heirs, but the other 50% you allocate as you wish. So half of the apartment and half of the savings they would inherit anyway, but half you can direct, and in addition, you can sell the apartment while you are alive and spend all the money as you wish, and then they wouldn't really inherit anything. Third option, you can file a moral damage action against Sophia for the note and the insults. Moral damage is difficult to prove and does not always pay off financially, but it has a strong symbolic value. It shows that you will not accept being humiliated. Fourth option, you can simply move away from them completely, cut off all contact, live your life without them, protect your mental and emotional health, and let them find out through the probate that they have been partially disinherited in the future when you die. He stopped talking and looked at me, waiting for my reaction, and I felt something strange. I felt relief knowing that I had rights, that I wasn't crazy, that I could take action, but I also felt deep sadness because all of that meant the definitive end of the relationship with my children. It meant accepting that the family I dreamed of having didn't exist and would never exist. But at the same time, I knew that this family had already died a long time ago. I was just refusing to bury the body. I replied to Dr. Rodrigo that I wanted to do everything. I wanted to collect the loans judicially. I wanted to change the will immediately. I wanted to sue Sophia for moral damages. I wanted to protect myself legally in every way possible. He looked at me with surprise and then with respect. He said that normally clients in my situation hesitate a lot, but that my decision was courageous and that he would help me in everything. He explained that his fees were 150 Rs per hour of work, or we could make an agreement of 20% of the amount recovered in the collection actions. I agreed to pay by the hour because it seemed more honest. We signed a service provision contract right there. I left an advance of 1,500 Rs that he said would be enough to start the work, and I left that office at 11 o'clock on Monday morning, feeling for the first time in days that I had some control over my life, that I was not just someone who made things happen, but someone who could make things happen. I spent that entire Monday on the move. I went to the notary's office and made an appointment to write a new will for the following week. I went to the bank and transferred 80,000 Rs from my savings to a new account that I opened at another bank, an account that only I would have access to. I transferred it in 4 operations of 20,000 Rs each so as not to draw attention from the bank's system. I left only 43,000 Rs in the old account, as if it were the total of my savings. I went to Dona Conceção's house, my neighbor, and asked if she could be a witness in case I needed to testify about my emotional state in the last few months. She immediately agreed, and also told me that she had seen Roberto and Beatrice arriving at the building several times and leaving quickly without spending time with me, that she had been surprised but hadn't gotten involved. Now she understood that something was wrong and made herself available. That moved me because it was the first time in a long time that someone offered help without me having to beg. I returned home at 5 in the afternoon, tired but satisfied with the productive day. I made a simple dinner, pasta with tomato sauce, ate alone in silence, washed the dishes, took a shower, went to bed at 9 at night, and slept soundly for the first time since Saturday. I slept 8 hours straight without waking up once, and on Tuesday I woke up at 5 in the morning with a mood I hadn't felt in years. The following days were filled with meticulous preparation. Dr. Rodrigo prepared a collection petition against Roberto and Beatrice, requesting payment of the amounts borrowed, plus interest of 1% per month from the date of the loans, plus monetary correction by the IPCA. The total value of the action against Roberto was 23,200 reais, and against Beatrice was 9,800 reais. On Thursday, the 23rd of November, at 10 o'clock in the morning, the petitions were filed in the district's civil court. Dr. Rodrigo said that the bailiffs would go to their homes to deliver the notifications, probably on the following Monday, the 27th, and that I should prepare myself psychologically for their reaction. They would probably try to contact me. They would get angry. They would try to convince me to give up, and I needed to be strong not to give in. At the same time, Dr. Rodrigo also prepared an action for moral damages against Sofia, for insult and defamation based on the note she had placed in my bag. The amount claimed was 15,000 reais for moral damages, an action that would be filed shortly after the collection actions. On Friday, the 24th, I went to the notary's office and signed my new will in the presence of 2 witnesses provided by the notary's office itself. I declared that 50% of my assets, in accordance with legal obligation, would go to my necessary heirs, Roberto Mendes and Beatriz Mendes Santos, in equal shares, but the other 50%, I allocated 25% to the charity Casa de Apoyo ao Idoso, which was in the city and which I knew by name, and 25% to Dona Conceição, my neighbor, who had been more family to me in recent years than my own children. The notary read the will out loud, confirmed that I was in my right mind and doing it of my own free will. I signed. The witnesses signed. I paid the fee of 280 reais, and I left there with a certified copy of the will kept in my bag. I left there feeling a mix of sadness and liberation. Sadness because I was making the death of the relationship with my children official. Liberation because I was ensuring that at least part of what built in life went to people who valued it. The weekend passed. Saturday and Sunday were calm days where I stayed at home resting, reading, watching television, taking care of the plants on the balcony, and mentally preparing myself for Monday, which would be the day the bomb exploded. And when Monday, the 27th of November arrived, I was ready. I woke up at 6 in the morning, had a large coffee, dressed in comfortable clothes because I was going to be at home all day, and waited. Dr. Rodrigo had warned me that the bailiffs usually made deliveries between 9 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon, and that I would probably receive calls or visits from my children very quickly after receiving the notifications. And that was exactly what happened. At 11:20 in the morning, my cell phone rang. It was Roberto, his number. I knew it by heart. I let it ring 6 times before answering. I answered and I just said hello, and he exploded on the other end. "What's this mother's story about you suing me? How crazy is this? I just had a bailiff here at my house giving me a notification of collection action. You're suing me for 15,000 reais that I borrowed from you. How absurd. You've gone crazy? You're sick? We need to talk urgently. Where are you?" And I replied in a calm and cold voice that surprised even myself. "I'm at home, Roberto. I'm not sick or crazy. I'm just collecting what you owed me 4 years ago and promised to pay and never paid. You have 2 ways now, either pay what you owe or answer. In court, the choice is yours." And he shouted, "You can't do this to me. I'm your son. How dare you sue me? What mother does this?" To which I replied that a mother who is treated like dead weight does this, Roberto. A mother who receives a note telling her to disappear does this. A mother who is humiliated in front of everyone do this. and there was silence on the other side for a few seconds before he asked in a voice that was softer than a note, and I said the note that his wife put in. My bag on Lucas's birthday. A note saying that I am dead weight and that I should disappear before you put me in an asylum and forget me there. That note, Roberto. And he stammered, I didn't know about that note. Sophia didn't tell me. That wasn't my idea. And I said, so you don't agree with what is written in the note, Roberto. You think I'm not dead weight. You want my presence in your lives. And he remained silent because he couldn't lie blatantly, but he also didn't have the courage to tell the truth. And after about 10 seconds of silence, he said, Look, Mom, things are complicated. We have our problems, our lives. You need to understand that we can't support you emotionally, but that doesn't mean we don't like you. It's just that sometimes you're very needy, very dependent, and we need space. I heard that, and I felt like laughing nervously, laughing in disbelief, me dependent since they had barely appeared in my life for 4 years, me needy being that I never asked for anything other than a little occasional attention. And I replied, You know, Roberto, I'm not going to discuss this with you. The only thing I want from you now is my money back. And I hung up the phone on him. I hung up and I was looking at my cell phone shaking with adrenaline. And 5 minutes later, the phone rang. Again, it was Beatrice, I answered. And she was crying and talking at the same time. Mother, for the love of God, what is happening? I received a bailiff here now handing me a piece of paper saying that you are suing me for 8,000 reis. What do you mean, Mother? Roberto called me saying that you sued him too. You sued your own children. How could you do this? I don't have all that money. I'm going to have to pay it in installments. They're going to deduct it from my salary. I could lose my job because of this. You thought to that, and I replied, I thought yes, Beatrice. I thought you borrowed money from me promising to pay, and you didn't. I thought that on Sunday when I went to visit you in the hospital, you dismissed me as if I were nothing. I thought that you, like your brother, have treated me like a burden for years. So yes, I thought and decided to demand what is rightfully mine. And she said between sobs, But Mom, we can talk. We can make an agreement. You don't need to. Sue me, I'll pay in installments, I promise. And I said you already promised that 2 years ago, Beatrice, and only paid 2 installments. So no, I don't trust promises anymore. Now either you deposit the full amount within 30 days, or you will respond in court, and the judge will decide. And she hung up the phone crying, and I sat there on the sofa, feeling something strange. It wasn't exactly satisfaction. It was more relief at being doing something, instead of just suffering passively. The phone rang 3 more times that afternoon. Twice Roberto, and once an unknown number that I suspected was Sophia, so I didn't answer any of the 3 calls. I also received 7 WhatsApp messages, 4 from Roberto saying that I was exaggerating, that he was going to talk to his lawyer, that I was going to regret it, that at one point I was going to need them, and they weren't going to be there anymore. 2 messages from Beatrice, begging me to reconsider, saying that I was destroying the family. And a message from Sophia, who finally admitted having written the note, but saying that it had been in a moment of anger, and that it wasn't to be taken seriously, that it was just venting, and that I was being vindictive and petty by suing them over money. I read all the messages but didn't respond to any of them. I blocked Sophia's number because I didn't want any more contact with her. Roberto and Beatrice's numbers I left unblocked, but I put it on silent. On Tuesday, I received a call from Dr. Rodrigo saying that he had also filed a moral damage action against Sophia for insults based on the note. She would be notified in the next few days, and that he was sure that things would escalate quickly. He advised me not to answer any more calls from them, to direct any contact to him as my lawyer, and I agreed. I sent his number by message to Roberto and Beatrice, saying that any contact about legal issues should be done through my lawyer, Dr. Rodrigo Mendes, and I blocked their number too. I blocked my 2 children, a symbolic and painful gesture, but necessary for my mental health. A week passed, the first week of December, and I began to receive information from Dr. Rodrigo about the movements on the other side. Roberto had hired a lawyer and filed a dispute, alleging that the money had been a verbal loan without agreed interest, and that he was willing to pay only the original amount without correction. Beatrice had sent a settlement proposal offering to pay 4,000 reis in 10 installments. Sophia had contested the action for moral damage, claiming that the note had been misinterpreted and that there was no intention to offend. All reactions predicted. By the Dr. Rodrigo, who advised me to refuse any agreement at that time. He said that it was a common strategy for the opposing party to try to minimize the debt, and make a cheap agreement at the beginning, but that if we were patient, we would get better values or favorable sentences. I trusted him and followed his advice. I told him to reject all proposals. Meanwhile, my life went on. I discovered that loneliness, when consciously chosen, hurts less than loneliness when imposed. I started leaving the house more. I went for a walk in the square near my building every morning at 7 o'clock, walked for 40 minutes around the lake, watched the ducks, the people running, the elderly people exercising in groups. And one morning, a lady of approximately 65 years old who I always saw walking started a conversation with me. Her name was Rosa. She was also a widow. She had lost her husband 5 years ago to cancer. She had 2 children who lived in other cities and rarely visited. We talked during the entire walk, exchanged phone numbers, and the next day we agreed to walk together and a friendship began. In the second week of December, I had the first conciliation hearing for the action against Roberto. I was accompanied by Dr. Rodrigo to the forum. We arrived at 2 in the afternoon as scheduled. Roberto was there with his lawyer. It was the first time we had seen each other in person since Lucas's birthday. He was thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, a tired expression. He avoided looking directly at me. The judge tried to promote an agreement. Roberto's lawyer offered 18,000 reais in installments over 18 months. Dr. Rodrigo proposed 23,000 reais in cash or paid in installments over a maximum of 6 months. Roberto said that he was unable to pay this amount, that he was having financial difficulties, that he had car and apartment payments. Dr. Rodrigo showed that he had a good job with a salary of approximately 8,000 reais per month, according to research we had done. So he did have the ability to pay. The hearing lasted an hour and 20 minutes with no success in reaching an agreement. The judge scheduled a new hearing for January and said that if there was no agreement, he would probably be sentenced in February. I left that forum with mixed feelings. I saw my son being forced to sit in the same room that I ordered caused me sadness, but at the same time I felt that I was doing the right thing. I was defending myself. In the third week of December, Rosa invited me to join a seniors group that met twice a week to do crafts and talk. I accepted the invitation with some trepidation because I had never participated in anything like that. I went on Wednesday at 3 in the afternoon to the neighborhood community hall. There were about 12 women, between 60 and 75 years old, all very friendly. They made a point of including me. They taught me how to crochet because I had never learned it properly. We spent 3 hours talking and laughing, and when I left, I felt light for the first time in a long time. I felt that maybe there was life beyond the pain, beyond the mourning for the family I lost. I went back the following Friday and continued going back every week. I learned how to make crochet doilies, napkins, table centerpieces. I discovered that I had a knack for it, and one of the ladies in the group called Carmen, who sold handicrafts at the fair, said that if I wanted, I could sell my pieces along with hers, that we would split the profit half and half. I accepted the proposal and started making pieces at home in my spare time. I discovered that I could make 2 doilies a week. Carmen sold them each one for 25 reais, and it gave me half. 50 reais a month wasn't much, but it was extra income. And mainly it was something mine, something I did not out of obligation, but for pleasure. Christmas arrived, the 25th of December, and for the first time in 47 years, I didn't spend Christmas with my children. I spent it alone in my apartment. But it wasn't as bad as I imagined. The day before, Rosa called me asking what I was going to do for Christmas, and when I said I would be alone, she invited me to spend it with her and her friends from the crafts group at Carmen's house. I hesitated, but ended up accepting. I went to Carmen's house at 7 in the evening, taking some French toast that I made during the afternoon. I had 7 people there, including me and Rosa. We talked, ate, laughed. It wasn't the traditional Christmas I knew, but it was welcoming. I felt like I belonged there in a way I hadn't felt for years in my own family. I went home at 11 at night and slept peacefully. The year turned. 2024 became 2025, and I felt that I was turning too, transforming, letting the submissive Clara die and giving birth to a Clara who did not accept crumbs of affection. In the first week of January, there was a hearing for the action against Roberto. He took a witness who testified that he was really in financial difficulties. I took Dona Conceição, who testified about my emotional state after the humiliation of the birthday. I also took prints of old messages where he promised to pay the loan and didn't pay. The judge seemed impressed with the evidence. said he would study the case and give a sentence in 30 days. In the second week of January, there was a hearing for the lawsuit against Beatriz. She went alone without a lawyer to try to save money. She cried during the hearing, saying she regretted it, that she wanted to pay, but didn't have all the money. Dr. Rodrigo was adamant, showed the transfer receipts, showed the unfulfilled promises. The judge tried to reach an agreement. She offered $6,000 in 12 months. I refused. The judge scheduled the sentence for February. In the third week of January, there was a hearing for the moral damage action against Sofia. She went with a very well-dressed lawyer who was clearly expensive. He tried to argue that the note had not been a threat, that it was just a private outburst. Dr. Rodrigo read the note out loud in front of the judge. Don't you realize that no one here wants you around? You are a dead weight that we carry out of obligation. Do everyone a favor and disappear from our lives before we have to admit you to an asylum and forget you there. The judge was visibly bothered by the content. He asked if I had other evidence of mistreatment. Dr. Rodrigo showed cold messages, showed photos of Lucas's birthday parties where I hadn't been present in the last 2 years, showed that the behavior was not isolated but standard. Sofia's lawyer tried to minimize it but failed. The judge said he would give sentence in 45 days. While waiting for the sentences, my life continued to change. In February, I joined a stretching class for seniors that took place in the square on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. I met more people. I expanded my social circle. I was making friends for the first time since Henrique died. I realized that I had spent 7 years with practically no social life because I thought my children were enough, but they never were. I had deluded myself. I had projected onto them a family that didn't exist. In March, I received the first sentence, that of the action against Roberto. The judge ordered him to pay 21,800 reais in a single installment or a maximum of 3 installments of 30 days each, an amount that included the original loan plus interest and correction, minus a small discount for recognizing that he was in difficulties. It was not everything I asked for, but it was a significant victory. Roberto deposited the first installment of 7,200 reais the day after the sentence and deposited the other 2 in the following months. I got my money back. In April, I received the sentence for the action against Beatriz. The judge ordered her to pay 8,400 reais in installments in a maximum of 6 installments. She negotiated with me through Dr. Rodrigo, and we reached an agreement of 8,000 in cash, which she paid the following week, probably borrowing from someone, plus money recovered. In May, I received the sentence for the moral damage action against Sofia. The judge sentenced her to pay me 12,000 reais for moral damages, recognizing that the note had been offensive and characterized psychological violence, in addition to ordering her to make a formal, written retraction that was attached to the process. She appealed the decision, but the appeal was denied. She had to pay the 12,000 reais in 2 installments and write a letter apologizing formally that reached me through Dr. Rodrigo, a cold and legal letter where she said she recanted any offense caused. I read that letter without feeling anything, neither anger nor satisfaction, just indifference. Adding everything up, I recovered approximately 41,400 reais over the course of 5 months. It wasn't everything I had invested in them throughout my life, but it was symbolic. It was a declaration that I had value, that I was not disposable, that my pains were not irrelevant. With this recovered money, plus the savings I had saved, I decided to do something for myself, something I had never done. I decided to travel. Rosa and the Crafts Group were organizing a 10-day trip to the interior of Minas Gerais, visiting historic cities, Ouro Preto, Mariana, Tiradentes, São João del Rei. The package cost 3,400 reais, including transport, accommodation, and some meals. I paid in cash without thinking twice. In June, we made the trip. It was the first time I traveled since Henrique's death. It was liberating. I discovered beautiful cities, Baroque churches, museums, wonderful Minas Gerais food. I took hundreds of photos. I laughed a lot. I felt alive in a way I hadn't felt in decades. I came back from that trip transformed. I came back understanding that my life hadn't ended. It had just changed direction. In July, I started dating a man I met in the stretching group. His name was Antonio. He was 72 years old. He had been a widower for 4 years. He had been a baker for 50 years. He was a simple and kind man. He treated me with respect and affection that I hadn't received in a long time. We started having lunch together once a week, then twice. Then we were talking on the phone every night before going to sleep. And in August, he officially asked to date. I accepted, and for the first time in 7 years, I felt emotionally accompanied. In September, a year after Lucas's birthday where it all started, I received a message from an unknown number. It was Roberto. He had gotten my new number somehow. The message said, "Mom, we need to talk. Not about money, about us, about our family. Can we see each other?" I read that message and felt a pang in my heart. Part of me, the part that was still a mother, wanted to answer yes. I wanted to run and hug my son and pretend that nothing had happened. But the strongest part of me, the part that had learned to respect itself, knew that I couldn't do it. "That's it." So Roberto replied, "I agree to talk, but it needs to be in a neutral place, and in the presence of my lawyer. I no longer trust a conversation just between us." He took 2 days to respond and agreed. We made an appointment for the following week in a cafe in the city center on the 27th of September at 3 in the afternoon. I arrived on time, accompanied by Dr. Rodrigo, who kindly agreed to go without charging me additional fees because he knew it was an emotional meeting more than a legal one. Roberto arrived 5 minutes late. He looked different, shorter hair, shaved, clothes more simple. He looked older than a year ago. We sat at a table with 4 seats, me on one side with Dr. Rodrigo, he on the other alone. We ordered coffees, and he started talking. He said that it had been a very difficult year, that the court case had damaged his relationship with Sophia, that they had fought a lot about the note and how they treated me, that Sophia had finally admitted that she was jealous of the attention that Lucas gave me, that she grew up without a grandmother present and was angry at seeing her son with a grandmother alive and available, totally irrational jealousy. But that explained part of the cruelty. He said that they had gone to couples therapy, and there he had started to process a lot of things. He had realized that he reproduced with his mother the behavior that Sophia's own father had towards her mother, behavior of neglect and emotional distancing, said that the therapist had asked when he stopped seeing his mother as a person and started seeing it as an obligation, and he couldn't answer, but he knew it had happened at some point. He said that he regretted it, that he understood that money he could replace but time and relationship could not, that he wanted to try to rebuild something if I accepted, that he didn't expect immediate forgiveness, but wanted the chance to show real change over time. I listened to everything in silence. Dr. Rodrigo next to me was also silently observing. When Roberto finished speaking, I spent a few minutes just looking at the coffee in front of me. Then I looked at him and said, "Roberto, I heard everything that you said, and I believe that you are being sincere now in this moment. But momentary sincerity does not erase a year of cruelty. It does not erase years of neglect. Before that, you treated me as disposable. Your wife humiliated me in an unforgivable way. You remained silent when you should have defended me. You disappeared when I needed you. And now, after legal proceedings and therapy, you come to say that you regret it. And I believe that you do regret it. But regret does not mean that I have an obligation to forgive you or to have it again. Close relationship with you. I spent this last year rebuilding myself, meeting new people, having a social life, traveling, dating, discovering that I exist beyond being a mother. And I realized that I am happier now without you than I was before pretending that I had a family together. So what I'm saying, Roberto, is that I accept your apology, but I'm not going to remove the distance I put between us. You can go on with your life, I'll go on with mine. Maybe in the distant future, we can have some kind of cordial coexistence, but it will never be like before, because before it was me canceling myself out to try to gain crumbs of affection from you, and I don't do that anymore. I no longer accept being treated as less than I deserve. When I die, you will inherit half of my assets, because it's your right by law, but you won't inherit everything, because I changed my will, leaving part of it to people who were more family to me than you. I'm not saying this to hurt you. I'm telling you to understand that actions have consequences, that relationships when broken don't return to their original state. Even if glued together, they leave permanent marks. He cried. He cried there in front of everyone in the cafeteria, and a very small part of me felt sorry, but the bigger part remained firm. He said he understood, that he respected my decision, that he would leave the door open if one day I changed my mind. He thanked me for agreeing to talk, paid for the coffees, and left. And I sat there with Dr. Rodrigo, who put his hand on my shoulder in a gesture of support and said, "You were very brave, Clara." And I replied, "It wasn't courage, doctor, it was survival." Now we are in December 2025, 2 full years since Lucas's birthday that changed everything. I'm sitting here on the balcony of my apartment on a Saturday morning. It's 10:15. The sun is strong. The temperature is 31 degrees. I have a cup of coffee in my hand and a book of Chronicles open on my lap. I just got back from a walk in the square with Rosa and other friends from the group. I have lunch scheduled with Antonio in 2 hours. In the afternoon, I'm going to work on my crochet pieces. Because now I sell about 6 pieces per month and I earn approximately 150 extra reais. Next month in January, I will travel again with the group. This time to the Serra Gaúcha, 15 days in Gramado and Canela. The first time I will experience artificial snow. My bank account now has 102,000 reais invested, yielding around 800 reais per month in interest. I saved back part of what I spent in addition to what I recovered in the shares. My retirement of 2,400 reais covers all the bills. And there's still left over. I'm financially comfortable. I'm emotionally balanced. I'm physically healthy. I had all the tests done a month ago, and everything is normal. Blood pressure is 115 to 75, good cholesterol, normal blood sugar. I weigh 60 kilos, which is appropriate for my height of 1 meter and 63. About my children? I haven't heard from Roberto since that meeting in September. I learned through comments from Dona Conceição, who met the neighbor who is a friend of Sophia's mother-in-law, that they are doing well, that Lucas is growing up, he is now 7 years old, that they are moving to a bigger house, that Roberto was promoted at work. I'm happy that they are well, but I no longer feel that searing pain of being out of their lives. I just feel melancholy acceptance that we are strangers, who share blood and history but not present. Beatrice ordered message on my birthday in August. Just congratulations, Mom, with a heart. I replied. Thank you with a heart too. Basic education, but without depth. I found out that she got pregnant. She is expecting her first child in March. I found out through a post that Rosa saw on social media because they didn't tell me directly. I'm going to be a grandmother again, but I probably won't meet that grandchild. I won't be there in the first years. And as much as it hurts, I understand that it was their choice to keep me away, so they have to live with the consequences. I chose my mental peace above toxic relationships, even if they are with my children, and I don't regret it. There are still difficult days when I wake up and miss what could have been, days when I see a grandmother playing with her grandson in the square, and I feel a pang of envy. Days when I spend in front of the toy store and I think about buying something for Lucas, but I remember that I no longer have free contact with him. Days that I cry alone in the shower, processing the magnitude of the loss. But these days are increasingly rare. Most of my days are now light. They are filled with true friendships, with small joys, with a comfortable routine, with a gentle, loving relationship, with a renewed purpose. I even started writing my story in a notebook, thinking perhaps about turning it into a small book or blog to help other elderly women who go through a similar situation, women who are discarded by their family, who think they have no way out, who consider giving up. I want them to know that there is life after family abandonment, that it hurts but doesn't kill, that we can rise again and find happiness in unexpected places. If you made it this far in this whole story, please comment from which city or country you are watching, because this message needs to reach far. Leave your like if you believe that it is never too late to start over, that age is not a limitation, that dignity has no expiration date. Share with someone who needs to hear that it is possible to survive family betrayal and flourish afterwards. And always remember, while you breathe, you have the power to choose how your story continues. You are not obliged to accept crumbs. You are not obliged to forgive those who hurt you just because it's family. You have the right to choose your peace, even if it means temporary solitude. Because chosen solitude is less painful than company that diminishes you. I chose my dignity. I chose my self-respect. I chose to live my last years or decades in peace and not in constant war, trying to win love from those who don't want to give it. And it was the best decision I made in 67 years of life. It wasn't easy. It still hurts sometimes, but it was worth every tear, every court case, every difficult confrontation. Because today, when I look in the mirror, I recognize the woman I see. I recognize someone worthy, someone strong, someone who survived and chose to flourish instead of wither. And if I can do it, you can too. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to demand the respect you deserve. It's never too late to start over.